it's Coach Tori, and this is Raising Runners. We will be talking about running, mental health, youth sport burnout, specialization in sports, motivation, encouragement, coaching, parenting, sleep, nutrition, really anything that you can think of that we as parents or coaches or just runners can do to help our young athletes. Today, we get to talk to Dr. LJ Johnson, and we are talking all about hormones. Well, I guess more specifically, actually, we are talking about periods, and she talks about cycle syncing and how to use your period as your superpower. So, again, people may not be interested in this. If you have no interest in learning about this, if it does not apply to you, feel free to skip this episode. We do have a bonus episode coming out this week, so check back on Thursday. For that, it is one of our interview series that has not been able to come out in time. So check that out. But for everybody else, please tune in because if for nothing else, Dr. LJ has the best energy. She is so engaging, super passionate about what she does, and has so much knowledge for us. So definitely check it out and learn something.
Oh, let's start with telling me who you are so then we can get into all the things that we're going to talk about.
Thank you, Tori. I'm super excited to be here. I am Dr. LJ Johnson. I specialize in women's hormones, all of the not so fun, not so sexy stuff, right? Like period health, period stigma, bloating, painful periods, all of the amazing stuff that we love and we don't love. And I think sometimes we don't love it because we don't know enough about it. So my goal is really to educate and empower and motivate your audience that we can live an amazing life despite having a uterus, despite having a period. And so, yeah, I'm just excited to delve into the conversation.
Awesome. Wow. Okay. You're bringing so much energy too. I feel like I should have had a little bit more coffee before. Okay. So now we can get into it, talking about hormones, as you said. And of course, with that, we're talking puberty, like you kind of mentioned, periods and all that. So I know boys also go through some puberty changes as well. I think, and this might be just me assuming, it's not always as drastic or huge in all of the aspects of life, but can you kind of talk to us a little bit about the puberty changes that athletes and everyone go through and how that kind of affects us in all ways?
Right. Well, as an athlete, right, you got a full-time job. You are showing up and showing out whatever, sport it may be. It could be volleyball, shot put. I know for me, I thought I was a runner. Baby, I probably wasn't as much as a runner as I thought I was, but your girl was doing all the things. I was very athletic. I was doing all the things, but then my period hit, right? And suddenly I remember that day that my dad came to me and he congratulated me to going into womanhood. And I was just like, ooh, I'm there, right? You think you're going to have more freedom. You're going to stay out late at night, honey. None of that stuff was true. It was just like, P.S. now you have a period, hope you're ready for it. I didn't get a whole lot of information about it. It was like, here's your pads, here's your tampons, don't sleep with boys, don't get pregnant. And that was like the extent of the conversation. So you're like, okay, great. I'm turning into womanhood, right? And then it was like, what is going on with my body? Your body begins to develop, right? These boobs come out of nowhere, hair starts growing and you're like, what is wrong with me? And there's just influx of hormones. And so I know it's very challenging, right? Because you're in middle school, you're in high school, you're in college, whatever, you've got all these expectations, you've got homework, you've got your part-time job, all of these things, but then your hormones start to play a difference, right? Those levels really start to increase. And so that is really like the easiest way, right? It's like the hormones were off and then all of a sudden a switch is flipped and they flood in and you're not really sure what to do with them, right? You're like, I don't know if I'm going to cry, if I'm going to eat a whole bag of chips, if I'm going to scream, am I going to have the energy to show up, right? And then you're still so active in your world. And so it's all this like turning into a woman added on to all the responsibilities. And even as I say this as a mom, I'm like, gosh, it must be rough for those kids because we have so many expectations, so many things going on. But when your cycle comes in, it's really an increase of those hormones. And the biggest thing I would say is if you have a uterus, don't worry. You're not crazy. Some of these things that are going with your body are probably freaking you out. You don't know if it's okay to talk to your mom about it. You don't know. You're talking to your friends. You guys are all trying to figure it out. And here's the thing, right? Your cycle is your superpower, especially when you're an athlete, right? It can kick you into the next level. It can give you these superpowers. But the problem is typically we dread our period. We're like, oh my gosh, we're going to be in pain. Oh my gosh, I got to pack these tampons. We're afraid that anyone knows we're on our period. So we're like hiding pads and tampons in our purses and our backpacks. I remember doing all the things, right? And it's like, it's a normal part of your world. And so I love to talk about cycle syncing because it is our superpower. Our hormones are powerful, right? But it's just when we don't have all the information and we feel like our body is just dragging us along that we start to really stress out a lot.
Yeah, well, so I guess just going off of hormones, periods, superpowers, I actually have in my notes to bring up, and I'm not sure if you know Camille Herron, she's an ultra runner, but she is like a famous in the ultra running world, but she has, I think for like her past 4 races, they all have happened on her period. And she talks about that. And of course, you know, she's like, nobody wants to hear me talk about this, but I'm going to talk about this. And like ultra running just in of itself is just raw and rough and all those things. And she's like, and then starting your period while you're running a 24-hour race is like insane. So I guess if you want to just like talk to us about I mean, I don't even know what to ask you necessarily.
I know, right? It's like we don't know what we don't know. So you're like on the edge of your seat and you're like, okay, LJ, you said it's a superpower. Baby, I ain't feeling the superpower. What is the superpower? So let's just talk about cycle syncing, whatever, right? Cycle syncing. This is your superpower. Here's the thing. Your cycle, typically we only think of our period when we're menstruating, right? When we're cramping, when we got to pull out the panty liners, right? Like I like to keep it 100. You don't think about your period till you're on your period. But here's the thing. Your hormones and your cycle is something happening all of the time. It's really broken up into 4 phases. So you've got the menstrual phase, follicular, luteal, and ovulation. And I know you're like, supercalo what? Just work with me, right? Just think week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, right? So when you're in week 1, when you're menstruating, so for example, Camille, honey, she's really holding it down. If she is starting her period and being an ultra runner, that is amazing. But not all of us are going to do that, right? And I want to kind of pivot that because I'm sure some of that is her extensive training and things like that. So she does it all the time, right? But I'm going to say it right now. If your period starts today and you're all of a sudden you wake up and you're like, I'm going to be a runner, baby, today is not the day. The day that you first start bleeding, week 1, when you're actually menstruating, that is not really the time to start picking up these intense exercises, starting these new routines. It's really time to just kind of be alone, to actually, you're feeling more of an introvert, right? So this is hard, right? Let's say that your period started today, but you've got a big volleyball game, right? You may be feeling like, I love volleyball, but why don't I want to go to the game today? Why is it when my coach is hyping me up, I'm not getting hyped up? Like, I'm just kind of like blah, right? It's okay to feel that. When you're in your menstrual cycle, you know, that week 1, like I said, forget all the crazy names, just think week 1, the day that you were bleeding, that is really where you want to be low intensity, right? So if you're training, right, sometimes you're not going to be able to choose, right? You're not the coach. You're not calling the shots, but it's okay to feel that little calm. It's okay to not have that crazy energy that I'm feeling right now. It's okay to not have that. This is actually my normal energy, but there are times when I'm bleeding and during my cycle that it's a little lower intensity, right? So this is when your levels are dropping. Your energy is low, and it's okay to want to withdraw a little bit. I think sometimes we feel the pressure to still be that amazing outgoing person. We feel that pressure to push our body a little bit harder. We feel that pressure that when we go in there for those squats, we're going to add another 25 pounds to each side. And that may not be the week to do it, right? Your body is really pulling back. It is time for you to restore, right? It's time for you to eat those nutrient-dense meals, get in the iron, get in all of those nutrients so that you really feel strong, because when your body is bleeding and when you're menstruating, you're actually detoxing. So you're letting go of all things, right? You're letting go of all negativity. It really is a form of detoxification. And so that can be challenging when you're in sports, right? Because your coach doesn't, get everyone together and be like, hey, who's in week 1? Who needs to take it easy? They're like, hey, we're running 15 laps. Go ahead and get your laps started. We're about to do this, that, and the other. And so it's more for you to know intrinsically, to not beat yourself up, that if you're not feeling the hype for the basketball game, the volleyball game, if you're not feeling all that enthusiasm, there's nothing wrong with you. It's perfectly normal to kind of want to be low intensity. Now, week 2, and I guess I'll pause there just in case you have any questions.
No, go through all the weeks and then, because I did write down some questions, but I think I'm not sure if you're going to answer all of it while you're explaining all the weeks. So go ahead.
Perfect. All right. So week 2, the follicular phase. That's when you're kind of getting out of the period, right? Your little mojo's coming back. You're not maybe at your hype game, right? You're maybe not at 110%, but you feel some of that, right? You're setting your goals, you're creating things. So for athletes, that's the time that you kind of sit back and go, okay, maybe I do want to start lifting weights, right? Maybe I do want to add some additional weights. Maybe I do want to try a different sport. Maybe I do want to level up my game, right? Maybe you're always on the offense and you're like, I want to work on my defense skills, right? That is the week where you start setting those goals, you set those intentions, and you can ramp up, right? Maybe when you were on your cycle, you wanted to do more yoga as recovery. You wanted to kind of dial back. But then when we transition out of that, we start feeling that energy. Once again, it's not at 110%, but you start feeling that moderate intensity. That's when your estrogen and your FSH is rising. Your energy and creativity is at its max. It's increasing, right? So maybe last week you're like, I want to sit back and chill. I want to Netflix. I just want to binge watch TV. And then this week you're like, I'm feeling it, right? Now, this is also when you can bring in extra protein. Protein is amazing at any part of your cycle, but bringing in that extra protein really helps as you ramp up that intensity. Then we go to week 3, which is more restorative, right? Once again, you're feeling the energies, but it's more inward, right? And so it's finding a way to show up in your sports, do what your coach wants you to do, meet the expectations, and also feel good about yourself. And I think sometimes we get overwhelmed and we're not feeling good about ourselves because we think that day that we wanted to take a break, we feel bad. We beat ourselves up, we start questioning, am I even good at this sport? Is this for me? And it really and truly is your hormones, right? Now, in that week, you're also kind of going up and down. There's a lot going on. Your progesterone's rising. Everything is kind of peaking, and you're just kind of figuring out what works for you, what doesn't, right? Those workouts that were super challenging when you're on your period, oh, baby, this week, they're not feeling all that challenging at all. You're like, I got this. I got this. I can run the ultra marathon, right? I can add that extra plate of weights. I can go that extra mile. I can have that energy to do the workout and still come home and knock out my homework and not feel like I need a break, right? So it's just really figuring that out. Now, ovulation phase, high intensity. High intensity, you are ready to rumble. Like that workout, you're like, give me more. The coach says we're doing this, that, and the other, and you're like, that was a warm-up, baby. Give me more. You want more. You're feeling more connected, not just only with your social network, but more connected with everything that you're doing. Like everything just feels right. And when I say feels right, like every workout, you're killing it, right? Every time you step out on the court, every time you do what you do, you're just nailing it, right? And I want you to remember that during that ovulation phase, when everything is great and you're communicating and you're working hard and all of those things, remember that and be okay when it's not at that intensity. Because I think what happens is that, especially when you're in sports, and I remember in college, right? Once again, my coach wasn't asking me, hey, do you feel like you want to do high intensity today, LJ? It was like, hey girl, this is what we're doing. And if you want to be starting, these are the things you need to do. So I had to kind of learn, and I wish I knew more when I was younger, how to really know that my body was going to be at these different levels and to not beat myself up. I think so many times we don't know what's going on with our body. And like I said, as a mother of 2 children, a girl and a boy, I think back, my mom didn't have these conversations with me. It was just kind of like, your period's going to be horrible. If it is, it's part of the journey, don't suck it up. Don't cry and, complain about your period. But it's like when you're in pain, you're not feeling well, or you're not feeling accomplished, it would have been nice to know about cycle syncing, right? So you've got those 4 different weeks. And so the biggest thing to remember is that your hormones change throughout every single week, right? So it's finding a way to maximize your workouts. Now, what I will say is nutrition plays a huge part. And here's the thing, right? Sometimes you may have those cravings and you just want to eat all the fun stuff, right? But you know that the next day when you go to perform, when you go to work out, when you go to do whatever it is you're doing, you're not feeling as great, right? And sometimes that's trial and error. I remember for me in college, honey, I loved me some hot tamales and chewy runs. Like I could sit and eat candy 24/7 and I felt amazing. Then it started getting to where it wasn't working for me, right? The next day I wasn't able to lift as much. I wasn't able to perform as much. I had brain fog. metabolic, right? I was super bloated. So it's like some of it is trial and error. Now, some of you will have true allergies, right? And so you know things that you're allergic to, but it's also being able to bring in those foods. I get so passionate about this. It's just being able to bring in those foods to really help you through your cycle. At the end of the day, if you don't get anything else from this podcast, that your cycle is truly your superpower. You just have to know how to optimize it.
Yeah. So, okay. Not even sure which direction I want to go first because I feel like you went in so many different ways, but like in the best way. So, starting with, so we have all these weeks, but everybody, I imagine, feels those things differently. So like, I remember when I was younger, my period was like not a thing. Like I didn't, if I had my period, if I didn't, I didn't have any, like, I didn't notice any difference. Now, as an adult, I don't know if it's because now I've had a kid or what, but it's like, I am, like you're kind of describing, like I'm knocked on my butt like that first week. So is it like just my perception of it? Is it something I'm doing that's making me feel it differently? Like, is that normal to feel a change as we grow up? Like sometimes it's going to affect me more or not. Like, is that just a difference in everybody? Because I also know, like I had a friend in high school who she would be knocked out. Like we were at track meets on, she's like, I got my period today. And she's like asleep under a tree after her meet. So I guess there's a question in there somewhere. But
no, absolutely. You're saying, I understand what you're saying. So yeah, there's definitely a question there. Everyone feels different in their cycle, but here is also something. Like I said, when I was younger, I could pound the hot tamales and the chewy runs and just keep it pushing, right? But as my body, more toxins come in, right? May it be through tap water, the makeup that I'm wearing, my Bath and Body Works candle, the more toxins that come in, then our body starts to respond to that. So for many of us, for me personally, I have the diagnosis of endometriosis. So I had a lot of period pain starting at the age of 14. It took me 16 years. I didn't get the diagnosis till I was 30. So that was 16 years of dreading my period, saying I hate my uterus, hating my body, all of these things, because my cycle, I was feeling everything. My body was hypersensitive. So I was that person that would be at the track meet, probably sleeping and miss my race, right? The coach is looking for me and I'm like napping under the bleachers because I'm exhausted, right? And then that a week that I'm feeling amazing, I'm like running and I'm doing and all these things. And so it really depends. Everyone's body is different. But this is the thing, a lot of people have started to normalize the, things like the normalizing the pelvic pain. I know for me, I would pass out during my period, like my body would just shut down. And if I wanted to do normal everyday things, my body's like, honey, it's not going to happen. So I think what we have to do is really realize that everyone's cycle is different. It may feel different, but there are things that you need to be aware of, right? Like if you're having super painful periods and you're cramping and you're missing school and things like that, it's time to talk to your parents. It's time to talk to your doctor. You need to create a plan. But we've normalized period pain. If you're passing out during your cycle, or let's say that I know once again, maybe TMI, but it isn't, right? If you're super constipated, let's say like your bowels are not moving, right? If you're having cramping and bleeding outside of your cycle, then these are the times that you need to kind of think about, okay, cycle syncing is amazing, but here's the thing, those things are not normal. If you're having to wear like a tampon and a pad at the same time, that's not normal. And so what's happened is we've normalized the pain, right? We don't want to complain. We don't want to be that weak woman that's complaining about her period. But here's the thing, if you're having those heavy bleeding and the cramping, if you're not able to sleep, if, period poops are one thing, but if your poops are like non-existent the whole week of your cycle, those things need to be addressed with your doctor because that's when there may be something else going on.
No, and that totally makes sense. And I'm glad you pointed that out because I think as much as like we're trying to be more aware and like we do need to talk about these things, I think we still don't do that enough. So, okay, now switching gears a little bit for people who like, I love the cycle syncing. I love that, we need to acknowledge what's happening to our bodies. There's different ways, we need to look at this, be prepared, all those things. For people who, I guess it's probably more like professional athletes in a sense, or people who like work out as their job, but probably can't accommodate as much for like, I need to take a break as much as like they probably should be able to, right? Mm-hmm. Like we know that that's probably not always the case. Are there things, I know you mentioned a little bit about nutrition earlier. Are there things to kind of like help us, I don't want to say like combat all of the symptoms of like having a uterus, but are there things we can do to like, okay, yes, I'm bleeding right now. I'm feeling low. I do need to perform today. Like what can we do with that?
Right. I would start with nutrition. As unsexy as it is, I know people are like, tell me that one supplement. I'm on Amazon right now to get it. I'm sorry. It's unsexy nutrition. The food that you're eating, especially when you have to perform and what I call show up and show out when your body's like, baby, we need to be taking a break. Nutrition is huge. Now, I'm not against caffeine. I definitely don't want you pounding Starbucks all day long, but sometimes bringing in a clean form of caffeine, may it be green tea, matcha tea, it depends on your tolerance. I know for my blood type, coffee is a no bueno. I love the taste. I love the smell. I love everything about coffee. As good as it's going to get for me is a coffee candle. That's just it. Like, I can't drink coffee, but I can bring in green tea. I can bring in matcha tea. Another thing I do when I know I have to perform and my body needs that extra push is nutrient dense meals. And what happens, right, as an athlete, and we're all guilty. So I'm not coming from the high horse of this is what I learned in school. It's more like I've been there, done that. I made the mistakes. We want to be on the go, right? We want to do the pre-workouts. We want to do the protein shakes. And then sometimes when you look at your nutrition, you're not bringing in foods. You're not bringing in whole foods. You're not getting in your vitamins, right? Bringing in a multivitamin. And this is the one thing I will say is if you are in that professional, position where you're a professional athlete or, you're like, hey, LJ, like my coach doesn't care if I'm bleeding or not. They need me to show up and show out, right? You need to be thinking about that 24/7. Don't just think about your period when you're actually in that week, right? So right now we're recording in September, almost October. So if you're in October, here's the thing. Things that you were doing in July, August, and September, that is really what's going to control that October period, right? So if you're having painful periods, if you're having all these things, this is the thing. You got to start right now because it takes about 90 days to see that transition, right? So bringing in nutrient dense meals, bringing in, clean caffeine when needed. Also bringing in a multivitamin. Many people don't realize that when you're taking birth control and different things like that, or even just not eating proper nutrition, you're not getting all the vitamins that you need. And so many times we want to bring in a quick supplement, but your food is your fuel, right? You need to be eating clean fuel. And what I see with a lot of my athletes that I work with is we're doing too much pre-workout. We're doing too many protein shakes. We're not actually eating nutrient dense meals. And then when we are doing big meals, we're on that old mindset of let's have a big plate of pasta because I have a big game tomorrow. And for some of you, those carbs are not clean carbs. And so it's spiking your blood sugar and you may sleep really great that night, but it may not help you perform the next day.
I love I feel like I've been talking to everyone recently about like carbo loading. And I don't know if that was like millennials and a little older. We were like really into like that pasta dinner before. So that's so funny because I don't think, I don't know, maybe people still do that a lot. I'm not sure. And this may be like a naive female perspective. I should probably know more, but birth control does that. And I know there's different kinds and they do different things, but I'm sure that affects all of like our cycle syncing and how.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Can you talk to us a little bit?
Yeah. So once I will start by saying that I'm not demonizing birth control. If it's what needs to work for your healing journey, do what you got to do, right? I'm not in your shoes, so I'm not judging. But what I will say is as soon as you bring in synthetic birth control, I want you to think of it this way. It's basically like you're telling your body, hey, homegirl, take a break. I'm going to let these pills do your job. So your hormones are like, okay, cool. You don't want me to show up and show out. You don't need my help. All right. I'm down for it, right? So your hormones take a back seat and you let the pills run the show. Now, once you start letting the pills run the show, they're synthetic. So when you have that bleed every month, right, when you're actually bleeding on birth control, that is not a true period. So you may or may not be ovulating and then you're not properly detoxifying your body, right? So your period is your fifth vital sign. Now, I know, and maybe even when you go to ER, right, they check your blood pressure, they check your temperature, all of those things. They usually will ask like, hey, when was your last cycle? Because it is a vital sign. So when you bring in birth control, like I said, for whatever reason, sometimes people have different situations where they need to bring it in. You have to realize that that bleed is not a true bleed. So you're not truly, able to regulate your hormones. And those synthetic hormones are really running the show. And the issue is that also when you bring in those pills, that you're becoming nutrient deficient. As soon as you take that first pill, patch, arm implant, whatever it may be, IUD, your body stops uptaking nutrients, right? And especially if you're an athlete, you need the magnesium, you need the calcium to make sure you're not getting the bone fractures and, all of these things. Like, you need the nutrients, but the synthetic birth control stops some of those. It stops you up regulating those. So you could be eating the most organic food in the world and gluten-free and all of these things, but that synthetic birth control is working a number on your body. Not to mention, it really wreaks havoc on your gut health. So you have to be very, very conscious, right? Sometimes people start taking birth control and they're like, I've gained a few pounds. And so that's the biggest thing we notice. But it's not just that. Like, are you more bloated before you eat or after you eat, right? Are your poops changing? Are your bowels not moving? Like, are you having weird aches and pains in your body? Sometimes it's not even that. It's more of a mental health where you're like, I know for me, I am sassy AF. So birth control doesn't work for me. It just pushed the sassiness to a whole new level. And I was like, I think I'm crazy. Like, I need to get off these pills. This is making me crazy, right? I would say stuff and I'd be like, what are you talking about? Where did this come from? I'm like, it's definitely the pills. So it doesn't work for everyone. So also realizing that just because you're not feeling it physically does not mean that it's not affecting your mood. Some people have an increase in anxiety, depression. And once again, if you're trying to show up and be active just in your life, that can really work against you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Cause I feel like I always say this, I'm like, I don't have enough understanding about it. And, we all at some point usually use it, it's so common. It's like, we should probably know a little more about that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Well, and this is something that thankfully is not relevant for me yet because I'm still a younger person, but menopause, I'm sure at some point I will have to worry about that with training specifically. And I'm sure I should have probably looked up a little more about it as well. But can you educate us a little bit on like that whole change and how I know that affects your body a lot, especially, when it's first happening?
It does.
About that?
Yeah, no, that's a perfect way to close out this podcast, right? Menopause. And I love how you said it. You're like, I'm dreading it. So I got to backpedal a little bit. We do not have to dread the change. When we think menopause, we think of our mother and our grandma that was having the hot flashes, that was snapping on us. They were just being ridiculous. And we're like, I don't want to be that crazy woman. Once again, your hormone levels change. Just because you're going into perimenopause, just because you're going into menopause, doesn't mean your life is over, right? It's just the hormones are changing. Now, it's a little harder to kind of regulate things, right? But that's when you want to focus more on the nutrient-dense meals and the detoxification. Typically, when you're going into perimenopause and you start having the weight gain or the hot flashes, or you're like, oh my gosh, I'm taking my favorite kickboxing class, but I've gained 5 pounds a month. Like, what's going on? This used to work for me. Your body is shifting. And so when it comes to training, right, and this isn't a blanket answer for everyone, but when it comes to training your body in fitness and movement, when you're moving into that perimenopause and menopause, more strength training is the key. This is the thing. We remembered when we would take, 20 minutes of, Zumba, we'd take 2 back-to-back classes, we do all the cardio, we sweat out the fat, we get in the black dress 3 weeks later and we were happy, right? Honey, that ain't gonna work for you when you move into the perimenopause, right? We need to leave the cardio queen days, nothing wrong with cardio, but those cardio queen days, we have to kind of mature as our body has matured and seasoned and really learn the importance of the slow resistance training, the weight training. We need that muscle mass. And so that cardio, those results we used to get, back in the day to slip in the black dress in 3 weeks, right? It doesn't work for us anymore. So that's the biggest thing I would say when you're having those hormonal shifts, to really make sure you're getting the nutrient dense meals, working on detoxing your body, gently detoxing, not doing, water fasts and crazy things like that, but actually supporting your hormones, and then making sure that you're, being consistent with what you're doing, right? Consistently working out, but really being able to trade that mindset of all that cardio and switching over to swim training.
Awesome. Well, Dr. LJ, thank you. I know we are running out of time. So do you want to just tell us really quickly? I think we kind of covered all of the things that you do because you do so much. You want to just really quick go through who should be looking for you, where we can find you and all of that, and talk about your podcast really, really quick.
Yeah, so I do have a podcast. It's the Holistic with the W Endo Expert podcast. We talk everything endometriosis, PCOS, and fibroids. For some of you, you're like, superpower, what is that? Basically, it's when that period and those hormones are not doing what they need to do. that's where you need to be. The best place to find me and get tons of free resources is on my Instagram. We'll link you to that. It's LJS_powerhouse. So LJS_powerhouse. And then all my links and everything are on there. I mean, if you're interested and you need some support, your period's giving you some trouble, you're listening to this podcast and you're like, tell me more, feel free to click the link on any of my, click my link and you can work with me and we can jump on a free discovery call and figure out what you need to do to get in the driver's seat of your health.
Awesome. And I will make sure I put all the links in the notes so it's easy to find you that way. Thank you so much. I really appreciate all the time and all the info.
I just want to thank Dr. LJ again for her time and all her information. That was so fun to record, but also super informative because, as you can tell, there was lots of things that I did not know that I probably should have. So that was really great. And again, check out everything she has to offer and her podcast. All the links are in the notes. So look for all of that stuff. Just a few other things before we end the episode today. My run club is going to be putting on an event in May 2023. Yes, I know I said May. That is a long time from now, but we are in the planning process. We have everything kind of setting it up now. We are looking for sponsors for the event. Well, I guess I should tell you what it's for. So it's for Youth Mental Health Project. I think I may have talked about this already on some show, but yes, Youth Mental Health Project. That is what all the proceeds are going to. It's a great organization. Obviously, if you've ever listened to another show, you know that I'm very passionate about mental health and youth health and all those things. So it totally makes sense. So we are looking for sponsors for the event because there is a virtual option. So people not just local to me will be able to participate. It's going to be really fun. We're doing a 1-hour run challenge as one of the events. So, you log an hour of running, you're going to track your distance. We're all going to be in a Strava group. So we'll be able to see how far everyone goes. Top distances will be getting prizes. So not just looking for sponsors, but we're also looking for people to participate because it's going to be really fun. So I just want to shout that out a little bit too. Let me see what else. In addition to that, local people, we started signups for our winter run group. So anybody it's for kids. So kids that are looking to run throughout the winter in chilly PA, please sign up. We're going to be running 3 days a week in a couple different locations. We'll just be doing warm up, workout, cool down, kind of keep it brief because we are going to be outside in the chilly weather all winter long, but it's going to be really fun. So check that out. Also, my run coaching, virtual online run coaching and running plans will be open November 1st. So there is some time still. That will all be on our Run Club's website as well. So all the links to everything are going to be in the notes today. So hopefully you find at least something relevant to you. Thank you for tuning into Raising Runners. New episodes every Tuesday, and we are always looking to talk to people about running, mental health, or anything along the spectrum that can help our young athletes, or just talking to runners or parents and coaches of our young runners as well. Hopefully you find our resources helpful. If you have questions, comments, or anything else, feel free to email me at marikeyrunclub@gmail.com.